Hi, this is Alessio, Rastani, leading trader. Hope you're well, and welcome to this fresh outlook on Bitcoin. Now, in this video, we're going to take a look at Bitcoin and see what this chart is telling us about the momentum and the direction of Bitcoin. And also, we're going to take a look at this particular information from the Commitment of Traders report about Bitcoin. And also, I'm going to share with you what potential mistakes we can avoid. But first, I want to just begin by thanking you for your great comments on my videos. I've received a lot of great comments from you over the last few days, and many of you are saying to me that you're making money, so that's great. I'm happy to hear that. I want to first of all just do a quick recap, because in my video where I announced my official position on Bitcoin, which was back on July 8th, before the major rally started in Bitcoin, I said, look, has Bitcoin finally bottomed? And I said, yes, I believe it has. And I said, it's time to do the opposite of everybody else. In other words, opposite of the herd. That was my prediction back on July 8th, before the rally started. Now, in that video and in the videos that came after it, I've been saying this over and over again. And I want to repeat it one more time in this particular video, which is, as long as Bitcoin remains above 6,000, we remain bullish. So that's been my message in the last few videos from about July 8th. And again, I've been repeating it over and over again. In fact, in the video that just came after that, I said the same thing. I said, as long as Bitcoin remains above 6,000, odds of a Bitcoin bottom is very likely. And at the time, Bitcoin was about 6,200. In fact, you will see that was the moment when we officially went long on Bitcoin. At the time, Bitcoin was about 6,200. That was the time when Bitcoin had a retracement back to its 61.8% retracement Fibonacci level. And as you can see, this is my algorithm, and you'll see that my algorithm went long on Bitcoin at 6,263. And of course, right now sitting in a nice profit there. And by the way, from reading your emails and comments, it seems the majority of you also went long on Bitcoin about the same level, about 6,200 or 6,300 by the looks of it. All right, guys, so what does that mean? It means this, that if we just take a look at a chart of Bitcoin right now, by the way, this is a chart of Bitcoin that excludes weekend data. I do also take a look at the chart of Bitcoin that includes weekend data. There it is. That's live right now on the Sunday market. But of course, this is the chart that excludes weekend data. And the reason I look at both is because sometimes the weekend data is often corrupted by the bots and high frequency trading activity. All right, guys. So the bottom line is this, guys, that the majority of us, and certainly those who've been following our videos, we've been long on Bitcoin. We've been bullish on Bitcoin from these levels, okay? From really very low levels on Bitcoin. And the reason why that's important, I'll explain in just a few moments. But the question is this, has my position changed at all since 2 weeks ago when I announced that Bitcoin was potentially forming a bottom and that I was bullish on Bitcoin? The answer is no, it has not changed at all. But it is important to ask this question. Is it possible that we're wrong? In fact, that is a very good question to ask, because one of the greatest traders of all time, one of the greatest investors of all time, who I've mentioned before, Paul Tudor Jones, he said this in the book Market Wizards. He said, every day I assume every position I have is wrong. Let me just repeat that. It's so important. One of the greatest traders in the world, Paul Tudor Jones, again, great investor, he says, every day I assume every position I have is wrong. All right? Now, why does he say that? I'll explain in just a few moments. It's not just Paul Tudor Jones. It is also great traders like Larry Williams, who won multiple awards for his trading. He said, my most important market belief is this. I believe the current trade I'm in will be a loser, and a big loser at that. The top traders in the world are actually pessimists. They're not optimists, they're pessimists when it comes to trading the market and in fact viewing the markets. The reason they do this and the reason why they say that is because risk management is about avoiding losing a lot of money. And that means this. Okay, so we are long now on Bitcoin. We have a bullish position on Bitcoin. But is there any evidence or facts that tell us maybe our position is not the right one? Okay, so that's something we're going to examine in this video. And it's important to actually examine this question. Is it possible that we were wrong on our trade position or prediction? Because I have received some comments from some of you. And in fact, it's a very reasonable point to make, which is maybe this is not actually a market bottom. Maybe this is not actually a trend reversal. In fact, some people are saying, and it's a perfectly reasonable position, to say, actually, this is not a trend reversal, but this is actually nothing more than a correction before this finally reverses again and collapses back down. And so actually, when you think about it, the bearish case for Bitcoin is that this is not a trend reversal, but in fact, it's nothing more than a correction, a little upside correction before this whole thing turns around and we go back to $5,000 and $3,000. Now, I want to make this point very clear, that the people who make this bearish case, in other words, the bears, the shorts, they actually do have a very reasonable and plausible argument. It is possible they may be right. However, I disagree with them. I'll explain to you why I disagree with them and why I continue to remain bullish. But on a balance of probabilities or possibilities, yes, it is possible that could happen. And again, I'll explain to you why I think it's a lower probability. But the bottom line is this, guys. We should listen to the other side. We should always listen to people who disagree with us. That's really important. One of my favorite philosophers is a man by the name of Karl Popper. If you haven't heard of him, let me say that he is one of the philosophers behind the scientific method. Karl Popper said something very important. To test a theory, you must first falsify it. You must refute it. Okay? In other words, the way you prove a theory is not by trying to confirm it, because that leads to confirmation bias, which of course is very dangerous. No, the way you prove a theory or hypothesis is by trying to refute it or falsify it. It's what's called falsificationism. So one of the things I always do when I look at the charts is I apply Popper's falsificationism. In other words, what evidence or facts can we find, or what needs to happen to falsify our theory? Okay, so first of all, let me explain to you why I actually don't agree with people out there, the bears, who say that this is a correction and they think this is going to drop back down to 3,000. Yes, it's possible that could happen. But remember, when it comes to market analysis and trading, we're not interested in possibilities. We're interested in probabilities, what is likely, not what is possible. So why am I bullish? Well, okay, let's go with the pro side. Let's go with the arguments for the bullish scenario. The reason number one is this. Let me show you. If I go on the monthly time frame, take a look at the monthly charts. Now, I brought this to your attention, as you may recall, 2 weeks ago in my video of July 8th. If you recall back then, here's the thing. I said that Bitcoin has come down to the monthly 21 average, a key level of support. Let me repeat this, guys. This is by far one of the most important levels in technical analysis, the 21 monthly average. You will notice, guys, that we've held this level very nicely and we've managed to bounce from that level. So far, so good. All right. Secondly, as I showed you again in my video of July 8th, 2 weeks ago, what we experienced on Bitcoin here was what's called a false breakout signal. So a false breakout, for those of you who may not remember, is when Bitcoin came back to this previous February lows. So it came back to the February lows here. Okay. And what happened? It took that level out. It went below that level. And what did it do? Immediately jumped back above it again. That's what's called in technical analysis as a false breakout signal. Let me repeat this one more time, guys, that a false breakout of a major support level, what Bitcoin did here, is one of the most bullish signals in technical analysis. It's a very powerful signal. So that is evidence or fact number two in favor of the bullish scenario that I'm putting here. So that's reason number two. What is reason number three? Well, according to the Commitment of Traders report, the CO2 report, again, this comes directly from the Chicago Board of Exchange. This is the most recent report that came out. And remember, this comes out every week. The most recent report, and again, this is before the rally started. Okay, so this is a report from July 17th, before the major move up in Bitcoin occurred. So take a look over here, and you'll notice that the shorts, so short sellers are, look at that, 4,135 contracts, as opposed to 2,495 longs. That means if you subtract the shorts from the longs, they're net short. Again, the non-commercials, the dumb money here, they are net short on Bitcoin. All right. And in fact, you can also see from the open interest positions, 80% short as opposed to 48% long. So what we can see here, guys, that up until July 17th, the majority of the Bitcoin traders out there have been net short on Bitcoin. That means, guys, the sentiment on Bitcoin is still bearish and has been bearish. So guys, what that CO2 report is telling us is there's too many shorts, too many bears in this market. So that's evidence or reason number three why I continue to remain bullish on Bitcoin. And I would say reason number four that I'm remaining bullish on Bitcoin is actually, some of you actually mentioned this in your comments, is because there are many patterns here that are looking bullish as well. So for example, we're seeing the beginning of a head and shoulders reversal pattern. Okay, a reverse head and shoulder pattern, and also the fact we're above the 21 daily average, which of course is a bullish bias. Now, what about the evidence against? Again, remember, as we said before, we need to examine our position and assume that it could be wrong. That's why it's important. So, what is the evidence against our position? Well, actually, again, remember guys, the bears, the shorts, they do have a very good point, because bottom line is we're still below major resistance levels. There are a lot of resistance levels above us. What are these resistance levels? Well, we've got the 100 EMA above us. We've got the 200 simple moving average above us. We've got resistance, the previous highs in Bitcoin at near the 10,000 level, and of course near the 12,000 to 11,000 level here. So those resistance levels, guys, could still act as negative pressure or selling pressure on Bitcoin. So the people out there who are saying, no, this is still not over for Bitcoin, it could still go lower, they do have a valid point. So given this bearish scenario just discussed here on Bitcoin, what does it mean for us? How can we test our theory? As Karl Popper says, how can we falsify our theory and make it more scientific? Okay, here's what we're going to do. What I would say is this. As long as Bitcoin continues to remain above 6,000, I still remain bullish. So in other words, as long as Bitcoin still maintains itself above the 6,000 level, we remain bullish on Bitcoin. But actually, there's another thing I want to mention here as well. What if, here's a what if for you. What if Bitcoin in the next few days or the next couple of weeks, what if it suddenly reversed direction and fell below 6,800? That would be the equivalent of a warning, a huge warning to you that something is not quite right. It would be similar to a referee in a football game giving you a yellow card. All right, guys? So that's a yellow card if Bitcoin were to fall below 6,800. However, if Bitcoin were to drop to 6,000, that's a red flag. That's a red card. That essentially would mean that Bitcoin would have a 75 to 80% probability of dropping much further lower than to $5,000 or $3,000. In other words, guys, if Bitcoin was to drop back down to 6,000, which I don't expect, but it's a what if. If Bitcoin was to drop back down to 6,000, I would simply close and exit any long position I have and just get out. Simple as that. But here's a piece of good news I want to give you. And here's something many folks out there don't understand, which is that trading and investing is not about being right or wrong. And I mentioned this before. It's not about right or wrong. What is it about? It's about risk versus rewards. In the words of Larry Hite, he said, I don't see markets. I see risks, rewards, and money. What does that mean? If you go back to my previous video from July 8th, here's what I said. In fact, here's a screenshot of my video right there. At the time I made that video, Bitcoin was at 6,500. And what I said was, look, for a professional investor, it doesn't really matter if Bitcoin goes up or down, or in fact, if you're right or wrong. For a professional investor, all that matters is how much risk are we taking and what is our potential reward. So a professional investor would say, look, if I'm buying here, if I'm buying at, let's say, 6,500, then my risk is only this much. It would be from 6,500 to 6,000. Why? Because if Bitcoin were to drop back down to 6,000, we would exit our long position immediately and cut any losses. So our risk would be very small. It would be infinitesimal. All right, guys? But here's what excites me. What excites me is the potential reward. All right, guys? This bit over here. All right, guys? The potential reward is at least 5 to 10 times our risk. So here's the thing, guys, and here's what many folks out there don't understand. We started buying Bitcoin at these levels, at these low prices. And in fact, from reading your comments, I've noticed that you've also been buying Bitcoin at those very cheap, very low levels down here. What does that mean? It means if Bitcoin was to drop now back down to those levels, so what? Our risk would be very small. Why? Because, guess what? If Bitcoin was to reverse direction, let's say it was to drop back down to 6,000 or let's say back down to these lows, we simply would be exiting our long positions immediately. In fact, what I can tell you is this. I've already moved my stop loss on the algorithmic trade to these lows down here. So our risk is extremely small. In fact, it's practically zero. Because as I've just mentioned earlier, if Bitcoin was to drop back down, let's say we're wrong. If Bitcoin was to reverse direction and drop back down to 6,000, guess what? I'm out. I will be closing any long positions and getting out immediately. Why? Because as I just said before, if Bitcoin, and it's a big if Bitcoin was to reverse direction and if it was to drop down to 6,000, it would immediately refute and falsify our theory, our hypothesis, and therefore we would be exiting our position immediately. That means I'd be exiting my long position immediately close to 6,000 or just above it. Let me just show you. So if Bitcoin was to drop back down to 6,000, there's a huge probability, about 75 to 80%, they will break this level and fall to 5,000 or even down to 3,000. Now, that's if that happens. Am I saying that's going to happen? No. Is it possible? Yes. But is it likely? No, not in my point of view. So as I just showed you, there's plenty of evidence, there's plenty of facts, in my view, seem to indicate that Bitcoin has still got further upside ahead of it. All right, guys. So I personally remaining bullish on Bitcoin. I personally still think that this is a potential bottom here on Bitcoin. There's a lot of things that I just showed you before. In this video, I've given you 3 or 4 reasons why I think this rally here could succeed and why I think we could see further upward moves. Again, one of the major reasons is that there's so many shorts, so many bears in this market. All right, guys. And the fact that we're above support. We're above the 6,000s level of support. All right, guys. So I think that short sellers are going to be shaken out. I think there's a lot of short sellers out there who are going to experience a bit more pain. And then we'll see how this works out. And also, guys, if this video has helped, please give it a thumbs up. And also, please remember to subscribe to our videos for future updates. Thanks very much indeed.